Yeah, good morning, everybody. Jamie Wallace here with our final Q&A Zoom meeting for the class. We're looking at lesson 10, and we're also going to be taking a peek at pretty much anything else that everybody on the call wants to look at. I'm quite open to exploring, any wide range of topics, whether it be, steps you might take after this course for those who want to do some more design work. And yeah, let's just we'll have sort of an open agenda where we can certainly dive into any wide range of topics that you want to. So maybe what we'll do, again, if you have a question or even a topic you want to cover, just drop it in the chat there, and that'll give me a good idea of what we're going to be doing later in the Q&A here. But I think it'd be healthy to start out with just reviewing lesson 10, although I think it's pretty obvious. But let's do that anyhow. Let's just, I'm just going to share screen here. And that's our Q&A document. We'll get to that for sure. So there we go. We're into our final assignment. And this is basically a concept plan. So we used to call it the final design, but now it's really a concept plan, because it's not going to have much in the way of details. You can certainly add detail to it, but it is really an overall concept, and which is great. That's what we're after here, is an overall big picture of your project site. So first part of the assignment is local network survey. That looks pretty straightforward. I won't be covering that. And I probably won't provide feedback for that on your assignment. Of course, I'll look at it and grade it, but I definitely want to dive into the final design element here, where we're putting together, finally putting all the pieces together for our concept plan here. So if we take a look on that discussion board, we have some instructions here. We've got some resources in terms of some of the language that you've been asked for: vision, mission statement, goal overview. So there's lots of info here you can take a look at, sort of timeline. And that is important. If you are providing a design for a client, and once you get to the end of that, there's going to be undoubtedly some questions as to how they would go about it. And often there are some very obvious phases, and sometimes those will revolve around access, and that can certainly be the case with urban landscapes, where it might be hard to get to the rear of the property. So that is often the first place that we recommend the work to begin. But again, it's every site is completely unique. But this is an important part of the whole, right? So once the design is done, we need to know what the logical steps are to go forward with that. And I would say with most of our work, it is done in phases, not always, but quite often. And that is that's not a bad thing, because it does give you a little bit of time between phases to just observe how the previous year's work or previous season's work went, as well as some changes may come up. And I actually find that when in the design process, afterwards, when we are either pricing or getting ready to do the installation, I really invite change into that process, and try and look for ways to improve on the project itself. So Yeah, it's sort of an ongoing process, really, of refinement. And regardless of how detailed your design is, once you get on site and you break ground, things can change there. So let me just, there we go. All right. So is there any questions at all? Oh, get my chat open here. Wanted to help. All right. Okay, so Becca had a question here. After we go over the assignment, you have a question about mulch swale trails and how to manage the overflow. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that, Becca. So we won't be too long with this assignment overview here. We have the rubric. So yeah, please just ensure that your concept plan has all these different components, and then we're all good. And this is, of course, what I use when I'm grading your papers or assignments. So let's just take a quick peek at some of the components that we want you to include. We want your base plan, so your existing plan, and that's going to be basically in this first sheet here, right? So you're just going to drop your base plan in there, and ideally you'll have your title block complete there as well. And then we're going to go into the concept plan itself and some explanation, including structures. So not everybody is going to include structures in their work, but if you are, that's a great idea. We want to have everything clearly labeled. So you want to, ideally, if somebody was to pick up your drawing, they'd be able to walk themselves through it in terms of understanding your intent and where the various elements are that you're including in your design. So labeling is really important. You want to show some existing vegetation, and you also want to show new vegetation. So sometimes people will gray out the existing vegetation and then add more colored symbols with new plant material. How you do it is totally up to you. That can be an effective way of doing it. We want a mission statement, so what your intention is, and the big picture on the project. Now, I'll be very transparent here. When we're doing our own designs, we do not provide a mission statement or a goals list. Those are really they become quite obvious during the process with our clients, because we have a questionnaire that they will fill in, much like the one that you have at the beginning of the course. But the one thing I really like about our design process, is that after each design layer, we have a Zoom meeting with our client, and we're showing them the various steps that we're taking within the design itself. And so it's a very inclusive process, and I would encourage everybody out there, if you're working for a client or for others, that is an important piece. When I was much younger in my career and just starting out, I was really wanting to, I took a lot of ownership, and definitely felt that some of those early landscapes were mine. So even though it worked out well, it's always better if there's more of that two-way communication between client and yourself. So let's see, we've covered our mission and our goals. Okay, so the next thing we want to do, and if we look at the template here, so here's our proposed concept. That's going to be the second sheet. So that's just, again, we want to make some a good job of labeling here. And then we're going to get into a pretty rich sheet here where we have our statement of purpose and our goals, and we're going to have our proposed zones. So those might be a little bit different than your existing zones. You may find your new design shifts the way people will travel through the site. So want to do that. Pathways and goals, so we're pretty good there. And then we get to a water management plan. And again, this is, I'll run you through a couple of designs that we have, and you'll see that this is actually the first thing that we address after our sector compass as we look at water and how we could best utilize it on the site. And then we're sort of gearing all of our other work around that. But with any project, you're going to have potential to make the best use of the resource that's hitting that site. Now, that could be coming off of an impervious surface like a roof or a driveway or a roadway. I know that's one of the things that in the agrarian, we've talked a bit about that. The agrarian platform, which is, again, a farm scale, a large scale design sequence. They have these 10 different layers. And often when they're looking at water here, they will often use roadways to feed to as a rainwater harvesting structure. So ditches beside a road will help feed ponds or dams, as they call them in Australia. So there's that's a pretty deep process there. But water, in my opinion, is that essential first part. And how can you best use it? And we're actually working on a design right now that's I think it's about 3-acre site close to where we live here, and we're in the water layer, and it's quite amazing given the constraints of the property. Our hands are incredibly tied. There's a large house that has a asphalt shingle roof. So for us, and they want an edible landscape, edible and medicinal. So that's capturing to reuse is out of the scenario. They've also got a septic field and septic tank in 2 of the low spots of the property. So a rain garden may be difficult. So this can be a really tricky first step, or it can be a really obvious, sort of expanding step, depending on your project site and all the constraints that are within it. Especially if it's a new home that's just been built and you've been contacted after the fact. So all the infrastructure is in place where the builder thought it should be. And again, those are constraints and you have to work with them. So that is our next sheet here in water management. So again, do your best to try and optimize the water. Now, that's kind of the one tricky part about our previous work in lesson 5 when we were looking at water is we looked at how water was moving across the site and how the micro watershed influences our project site, but we really didn't go to that next step of designing structures or designing concepts to best utilize that. So this is now the time to put that hat on and maybe revisit lesson 5 and just see what one can do with the water that's hitting that site. Okay, so that is the step here, and then we get into soil and for soil fertility and how are you going to increase the fertility of this over time. Most sites, we're starting with a low fertility. If it's in an urban area, it's often compacted. So just think about lesson 6, where we have the jar test and things that we can do to help that soil improve. And some of that might just be decompacting, increasing the aeration. There's any number that, of course, we took a look at in lesson number 6 there. So that's really the end of the concept plan in terms of its design. And then we get into how are we going to phase that in. And one of the trickiest parts, a budget. And even if you're a landscape professional, that can be a tricky part, because after years of doing this, we're pretty skilled at pricing projects and implementing them on time and on budget. But when you start out, that can be really tricky. So when I was first building landscapes, I didn't have the confidence to do it at a fixed price. So I would we would do all our work on what's called a cost plus basis. So we charged our labor and materials plus an agreed upon markup on the labor or on the materials. And, that was a good way to start. And we learned a lot about how long things take. It made it a lot easier to make changes during our projects because we didn't have a fixed price that we had to stick within. But the downside was it could, your costs could go up pretty quickly. So, while it's, I think, maybe a useful place to start when you're beginning, and in particular on smaller projects, when you get into larger projects, it gets a little bit tricky. So I wouldn't recommend that, but you have to start somewhere, and it is a good, safe place to start. Because again, budgeting or quoting projects you have to have some experience to know how long certain parts of a project are going to take. Yeah, so that is a big piece to this, even though it's not really, that substantial in terms of the template file itself. Here we got one sheet, and it's just kind of breaking it down. I'll show you. No, I don't have an estimation sheet set up I can show you today, but I do have that on the design end, but not the construction end. And that is a whole different kettle of fish. So I can show you a really useful book, though. I'll get to that a little bit later. So I've got a great estimating book that helped me out immensely in my career. And then we're looking at permaculture principles, at least five principles that were used. And then we're going to look at social permaculture, how that can address and improve social and cultural conditions, and then your SWOT analysis, the last SWOT analysis for the course here. So that, in a nutshell, is our concept plan. And again, moving forward, if you find that you are working for a client in the future, you may decide that there are parts of this template that are really useful for your work. But I would hesitate to guess that you wouldn't want to do all 150 plus design sheets here for somebody. So I'll be showing you what we provide as a deliverable, and it's just helpful to see what other people do. And I'm sure that for those who want to design for others, you'll find something that resonates, and it'll probably change too. I mean, our process has changed dramatically over the last close to 30 years operating on Vancouver Island here. And yeah, just being open to learning new things is and new ways of doing that really helps to make life much easier when you're in business. So, all right. So there we go. We have, again, some resources here you can look at. And we've gone over that template file. So is there any questions at all about this assignment? Okay, so Jenny D has a question here. So maybe what we'll do is we'll start looking at some of the questions, and Becca had a question just before you, Jenny. So we're going to get to yours right after, but let's take a look at Becca's. Becca, sorry. So I'm trying to remember. You have a question about mulch swale trails, right? And managing overflow. So any rainwater harvesting structure that you come up with, that you, whether it be a cistern or a rain garden or say a swale trail, which those are very, that's what I call them. Those are very, very useful. They all need to have an overflow built into them, because in this part, certainly the west coast of North America, we can get really intense rainfall, and you don't want to flood out your landscape. So you always have to provide for an abundance of moisture going through the system. So how do you manage the overflow? Well, Becca, is this is regarding your project site? Can you put your project site link in the chat here, and maybe we can get a little bit more specific, because to manage the overflow, you have to obviously look at the whole. We got to see, okay, so 1 minute. We have to see what the site looks like, and there we go. So let's just copy that, and we'll okay. We get a sneak preview of your concept plan right on.
Yeah. So Jamie, I'll just tell you what I was looking at.
Sure.
So on the right hand, like the east side, I was doing these little swale trails. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I just wasn't sure, like, if I'm supposed to put a gravel, like, pathway almost to one to the other, or I guess I just don't know how to not prevent flooding there if it does have a heavy rainstorm.
Yeah. Well, one question I have for you.
Yeah.
Your now it looks to me like your contours are flowing in this direction. Is that right? So
Correct. Yeah.
we're going this way.
Mhm.
Okay. So that would be, so we know then, often the trails I will try and put on contour. So
Okay.
when they flood, they're even. What you find, you don't have to, but what you'll find, if water enters this, it will obviously start to move down to the lowest point, and you might find you have way more moisture infiltrating here than you do up at the top here.
Okay.
So if you can do that on contour, that's great. Now, alternatively, are those 1 foot contours, do you know?
Let me look.
It's not critical, but
Sure. It gives just information. Go back.
yeah, no worries. We'll assume they are.
Okay. I can't, it's either 1 or 2.
Yeah. Okay. So the one thing you
Oh,
can
it's
do,
2.
Ah, okay. So it's probably 2 feet, close to 2 foot difference between this end and this end, right?
Yes.
So one thing you can do, I'll just change the type of pen I have here. One thing you can do, let's say your trail, we're doing a section view of your trail, and it's dropped from the beginning here. Let's say that's a 2 foot, and over here is 0, right? So you've dropped 2 foot. Now, one thing you can do is adjust the bottom of your trench. So what I have done in the past is change color here. I'll go and excavate this out. And perhaps at the highest end, I'll excavate it out more. And at the lower end, I'll make it a little more shallow. And then what I would do, what I have done, is I'll put in so that we have an empty trench. And if it's on contour, it would be the same depth all the way across. And if it's sloped, you can change that to suit. And then what I do is I get a piece of 3-inch PVC, and this isn't to scale, obviously. 3-inch perforated PVC or Big O, and I'll put it at the bottom of the trench. And if you were looking at the pipe from a side view, you'd have the perforations there, and this would be down, right? So what happens is water builds up in the trench and enters this, and then it starts to move. Okay, so it gives it a sort of free movement within the path. And then what we've got here is we have a pretty level pipe, right? So even though the trench is moving a little bit in elevation, the pipe is flat. And then at the very bottom, so if we look at your trail here, what I would do is link it up with this one, and then just have some sort of a spillway or or daylight the pipe. So in other words, you would excavate a little bit further along here until that pipe could be daylit with, say, a 1/4 inch, wow, per foot fall on it. So for every foot of pipe, the elevation's dropping a 1/4 inch. And that way, this will discharge excess water onto the landscape down here. And it'll keep your pathway dry. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What does a daylight pipe mean?
Okay, sorry. Here, let me get rid of. So let's say you have some sloped. This is the grade of the landscape, and let's say you've got a pipe underground here and it's sloped. So as soon as it exits that slope and you can see the pipe, that's daylighting. So then we know we can observe excess water coming out of it. We can also put in what's called a backwater valve, so we don't get rats or mice going in there. But this way, it's a really low tech, easy to determine whether it's functioning. Alternatively, you could send that into a rock pit if you didn't have the slope. So it would be a similar thing. Let's say our land was flatter, and I've done this on occasion. Not letting me change color here for some reason. All right. Go. All right, so let's say that's the top, that's the finished grade, and you have your pipe in here, and you have nowhere to get it to daylight. So a rock pit is just an excavated area, a hole full of aggregate, and your pipe would enter that basin, and then water would percolate into that basin. They do that where I live with a lot of the perimeter and roof drains. They send it into rock pits. So I don't like that personally, because you can't see how things are going, but just draining this, daylighting it would be way easier, right? So you can see, because at the top, like if this is higher and this is lower, your pipe's going to be a little bit higher in the trench. So to get it to pop out of the ground is going to be quite simple. Yeah, but you just want to think, with everything you do that way, you want to drain off excess moisture. Otherwise, your paths are going to start to flood potentially. And that's where the piping in the trail itself helps. Even though it's an extra step, it makes sure that water's going to be moving. And, you know, you can go to, I'll see if I can find a picture here. Yeah, I'll just stop share there, and I'll just try and find.
Can I ask a question about the pipes? How do you have to put in multiple pipes or along the
I will,
whale trail?
I'll show you an example here. I got a picture right now. I can just show you what one example that we did. Now, this is not a trail, but it's the same idea. So this is actually a little swale that we put in back in the days when I would do swales. I don't, pretty rare I do them now. But the water, we're picking up water coming in this direction, and we're trying to hold it here because there's a new landscape going below, right? So we're trying to infiltrate to benefit water. And that's the same thing we're doing with a trail. But here, this is a 3-inch perforated pipe, and they're quite easy to work with. And then we're just backfilling with wood chips. And let me move along here. So as you can see, like this is all level, and backfill the chip. And then what you don't see here is there's this valve. Because we're starting to slope now, we have a valve here, and hopefully we can see it. Beautiful plants, yes. Okay, I'll have to find that. So there's the end. That's where we're daylighting, right? So we're going to backfill all this. You're just going to see the very end of this, and then water is going to, excess water is just coming out here and infiltrating on the driveway. But let me get, sorry, I didn't have this prepared. I don't know if I got a picture showing that. Yeah, what you don't see here is there's what's called a sliding gate valve. And it is holding the water up in this area. That's all our irrigation. There you can kind of see it. It's within this valve box, right? So when the winter comes, we put our hand in there and open the valve. And then that means all this excess moisture is going to be taken away. So there'll still be some water being held here, but excess will be zipped out off down the driveway. In the spring, summer, fall, water is held here and it will benefit this landscape. And it certainly did, worked really well. So that is an example of, and the wood chips are a fabulous path material. So in this case, when these decompose over, say, 3 or 4 years, we just dig them out, put them in the garden, and put new chips in. All right, so I hope that is somewhat helpful. Becca, did that answer your question? I mean, you can.
Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you'll probably have to play with that a little bit. You may be able to do something simpler, but you do want to provide water a way out. As long as you're doing that, you should be good to go. Yeah, it's just like a rain garden. If you built a rain garden and there was no overflow and we had a huge event and then it started building above where you're hoping it to pool, it's going to start to potentially cause some erosion or issues at the side of the rain garden. So, all right. Well, if we have that one covered, let's take a look at Jenny's question here. So she's wondering if you have any advice where to go after this class. I was considering International Diploma of Permaculture Design. Any programs I would recommend? Yeah, that's a great question. And I found myself when I got through my PDC, just, I felt it was just the beginning of learning. And it really is. I mean, there's so many rabbit holes one can go down in permaculture design. But let me show you a couple of things that you can take a look at. We'll go back to our web browser here. And I'm not sure if I have shown you this before, but this is Jevin Bernakovich, one of our instructors and a good friend. He has this website, regenerativliving.online, and he's been building this over the last 3 or 4 years, I believe. So what he does is he'll put together a course with whoever he's working with, right? So Jude Hobbs, all kinds of people that he's worked with. And after the live course, he'll then put on a self-paced version of it that's less expensive, but has all that content. And so this is a really good hub for courses specifically. I did one with him back in, I guess it was near the beginning of this course. It was back in the spring, and that was lots of fun. But I've taken probably 3 or 4. I've taken the composting toilet and agroforestry and the hedgerow course while they were live. I did all those. My wife did this family food security course, and I did the propagating woody edibles. I love education, so I'm I'm always excited to take a new program. So that's something I would keep your eyes on. And that is really more topic specific. Jenny, what you're talking about, are you talking about the diploma course through PINA, the Permaculture Institute of North America? Is that the one you're referring to? Yeah. Yeah, it looks really interesting. I considered it years ago. I didn't go ahead with that because, at that time I'd already had a lot of design experience. So I was trying to, you know, consider what I was going to get from it. I think, and you know, at that time you had to pay a mentor to work with you. So, you know, it just didn't, it didn't seem like a good fit for me at that time. I could see that being really valuable if you're working with a good person. Yeah, I would certainly consider that. I probably would have done that if I had discovered permaculture a little earlier in my career. So, you know, I started way back in the 80s in the industry, and I didn't really come upon permaculture until we got into the early 2000, probably 2010, that area. So yeah, I think it's really depends on where you're at. That might be a really good next step for you. And I'm a member of PINA. I've been, you know, supporting them for a long time, and yeah, I've not heard anything negative about the program. I think that it's probably pretty demanding. Pretty big curriculum, or not curriculum, but I think they want you to do like 10 designs, and a number have to be urban or acreage or public, and there has to be some volunteer time in there. So it's a very interesting setup. But yeah, other than that, that's a good. I know that there are some out there that take multiple PDCs, so they'll take, say, the OSU program, and they'll take another one. It really depends on what you're hoping to do. Jenny, are you hoping to you know, take all these skills and design for others and sort of start your own consultancy business? Is that what your goal is at the moment, or are you still kind of just exploring? I see. Yeah, well, that's really smart. Working with somebody else initially is probably one of the best things you could do. And that's certainly what I didn't do, but I would certainly recommend people to do it, because you'll learn so much about how other firms operate, and you'll discover as well, you can be the best designer in the world, but if you're not dialed into other aspects of business, it can be hard. You know, you got to be a jack of all trades. So that's a really good idea. I would highly recommend that. And even if you didn't do the PINA course, just finding another sort of like-minded firm that you really admire and you want to get some experience with, that's a great idea. Okay, so I don't know if I fully answered your question, Jenny. Happy to expand on it a bit more, but yeah, it looks like you have a good plan in place, and that's certainly how I would go. When you go off on your own, it is a totally different experience. And again, you got to know a little bit about everything. So yeah, is there any, oh, you're quite welcome. Yeah, happy to share all kinds of things with as much as I can with you guys. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to pop them in there. Let me just take a look at, I think there was a question in the doc here that I have not answered. So this was a question, this is Becca's question.
Yeah, it's me again.
Yeah, so you, let me, I'm just trying to get back to, so you had, this was an area that it gets lots of moisture, or there was some little issue with it that you were hoping to rectify. Is that correct?
Yeah, I just didn't know what would best go there because it's kind of, it gets pretty shaded, but then it's just barren. So I didn't know what the best, yeah, I just don't know what the best thing to plant there or beautify it kind of thing. So I just didn't know if you had any ideas.
So the property boundary is,
It's about a foot over. So the fence is right there, and then
yeah.
it's a foot from the fence.
Ah, okay. So your car's well within it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So are you wanting to establish some sort of like a visual boundary, like a just extend the fence so that people know that is the edge of the property, or you're hoping to, if you're trying to grow something here, that might be pretty challenging. Um, just given you got a little bit of compaction beside it, and probably quite a bit here too. Were you hoping to have a little strip planting, or what do you see?
So it wasn't really a big part of it's not my property, it's my friend's property. So it
Okay.
wasn't really a big concern of hers, but I just thought it'd be nice to drive in and something pretty be there.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I would agree. There's definitely like where your marker is, there's definitely some settling of water that will happen there.
Yeah, no doubt. Probably a little bit of a dip and
Mm-hmm.
some compaction there. So you could just, essentially regrade it, add some gravel, and just encourage water going off onto the neighbors, I guess. What I would consider just from an aesthetic point of view is you've got all this definition, right, with the
Mm-hmm.
fencing. And, I would think about how you might be able to define this edge. Um, I'm not suggesting a fence. That wouldn't be necessarily a good thing. You'd have an obstacle for car doors to bang into.
Mm-hmm.
You may be able to do something low, right? Like, yeah, I don't know what other elements you might have in your site you could replicate. Where I live, there's a lot of use of stone and blasted stone. But do you have any other obvious elements other than the wood details on the site? Do you know what I mean?
No, what do you mean by obvious elements?
Um, well, often what we try and do is if we're adding new features to a landscape, we'll look at what is already existing and then try and duplicate that for the sake of unity, so that it looks like it all belongs.
Oh, I see.
Um, yeah. So if there was stone on the house or used around the house, or maybe there's little Allen block walls somewhere, that sort of thing that you
Okay.
could replicate here just to define the edge.
Mm-hmm.
I would consider that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't, may not be worth the effort for your client, but aesthetically it would at least give you, an edge to define that
Mm-hmm.
the side of the property there. But
Cool.
yeah, other than
I
that,
think
I
that
would
one.
just sort of grade it so that that water kept moving, even though you
Okay.
are dumping it onto a neighbor's property. That invariably happens. My neighbor, about 2 acres of her property drains onto ours, so it happens. So you have another question here about a rain garden.
Yeah, I
Provided,
just didn't know, because I know you said 10% of the area needs to be of like the flat area and the rain garden needs to be like 10% of the roof. I guess I just want to make sure I'm doing the math correctly.
yeah. So I'll bring up this picture, makes it easy to illustrate. And that's an average. So do you remember what the soil types were in your jar test?
It's a lot of clay.
So it's pretty heavy, eh?
Yeah.
Heavy soils and slow draining.
Yes.
So this handbook is for Western Washington, and you are not in Western Washington, but you can take some of this information away. And if you look at this chart here, I'll just put this in the chat so you got it. There we go. If you look at this chart here and you try and match up your soil types. So let's say you had, really poor drainage. So here you're getting about 1/4 inch per hour. I'm sure your tests showed more than that. But let's just assume it's really bad. Well, I call that bad. Really slow. Then we would start to look at the percentage of roof area to rain garden basin. And you can see how high these go up, right? And yes, these are dependent on regions, but these regions have different rainfalls. And you can go back and look at this book and try and, articulate how that would apply to your site. So you may find you have to increase your rain garden from 10%. You might want to go up. Like that would be a minimum. Where I live, we have sandy loam and it's gravelly, like if I dig a 1 foot deep hole and I fill it full of water, it's drained in about, less than 10 minutes. So
Wow.
it's very rapid. And our rain garden, it'll hold about 3,000 gallons when it's completely filled. And it's amazing how quickly it drains out. So this is a kind of the first step. You got to figure out your soils, and then that'll point you to the percentages that are safe to work within. And if you have any doubt, if you have any doubt, well, you got to go up, right? The other thing is if you do a test hole, so that's what I would recommend you do. You build this into your concept, but the reality is if you're going to go to install it, you'd want to do a test hole and just see what the ground is looking like. Now I'll show you. I can show you an example here. Uh-oh. I'll just go back to those photos for a sec. Let's see here. So here's an example of a rain garden we did. And we draw it out on the ground. And this is our basin in the middle. And these are our sort of shelves. Oops. But we ran into a challenge with this site that we weren't aware of. So we had sandy, gravelly, and then as we're getting just to the final little bit, we started hitting clay, and that I wasn't too happy about, especially after this is fixed price and after getting to this point. So our strategy here, and you can see there's a little bit of water in there. So we're getting a little bit of groundwater. Our strategy was putting in a drain line at the very bottom and giving that, sorry, these are other images, giving this water a place to go during high levels of rainfall, where we didn't want the rain garden to be inundated. But what we did was we've given the homeowner an option here of when to initiate this. So we put in drain rock and we cover it with fabric. And we have a clean out here, so we can clean the drain out. And at the very end, we have a ditch along the road. And at the very end, we have a sliding gate valve. God. There we go. See if I can get a picture of the valve here. I may not have a picture of the valve. There's our overflow. This is after it's been backfilled. So the water is allowed to get to this height, and then it goes into an overflow. And we also have a valve that we can open. I don't know if I have a good image of that. Yeah. So that can happen. You can be thinking you're on a good, you're in good sandy material and then hit something surprising. So this covered off that little surprise. And then we were able to go ahead with the rest of the rain garden. And still infiltrate. That was our primary goal, infiltrate and benefit the landscape that was going to be planted within the rain garden and below it. And I don't have any good after images, but that's kind of the way it is after planting. So this landscape is going to benefit from all this infiltration here. Now I see I got a few questions in the chat. Does that make any sense in terms of your rain garden, Becca, or what do you?
It does. I just didn't know. Does the size of the roof have anything to do with the percentage of how
Totally.
much? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, totally. So you figure out what section of roof you're going to send into the rain garden.
Okay.
Right. And then calculate the size of that. And you can do that on Google Earth. Mm-hmm. You know, you can do that on the ground too, just by measuring it off the ground. And then, yeah, you'd want to do a minimum of 10, and you might want to go a little higher if you have space for it.
Okay. That's,
yeah.
Okay. I'll make sure I had that right.
Yeah, but some exploration below ground is very helpful. So hopefully that helps you out.
Great. Thank you.
Let's see here. We've got a few more posts. Jenny D is just wanting to keep in touch with people. That's great. Cool. All right. Now I didn't get a chance to review. I tell you what, I'll just spend a couple minutes here and I'll just show you one thing before we close out our meeting. So just to give you a quick snapshot of our process. So when I say our, it's my wife and myself, and that's kind of what we develop over time. And I had to actually put this together for the course I did. I wanted to identify where aesthetic design dropped into all of this. So here's where we are. Step one, we have an initial contact with somebody and we get them to fill in a questionnaire and we have an initial phone conversation. So we don't even go to the site at this point. We're just making sure that we're a good fit for our client, for what they want to try and do. So we get a feel for their property and their goals. And then we decide whether that's a job that's a good fit for us. And if it isn't, then we try and find somebody we can recommend. And but normally, you know, most of them are good fits. If they've found us, then, you know, that's a good sign. So the next is an initial site visit where we meet with our clients, we walk the site, we probably spend, you know, anywhere between an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours if it's a really large site. And we're just trying to absorb the site, not so much what they want to do. We've already figured that out from the first step here. But we're trying to get a really good idea of the site and what we need to map it, because that, of course, is step number one, is our base plan creation. So that's important. And then we put together a proposal and figure out whether how are we going to survey this? We can use a drone survey, and we build that all into the proposal. And these are things that we will include. So site visit, time and mileage. We have to figure out how long it's going to take us to create the base plan with the mapping. So some sites are really quick and straightforward, and other ones, like the one I'm working on right now, is harder. So they're all a little bit different. And then it's not in here, but we traditionally do a sector map. I should just put that in here. Or sector compass, whatever you want to call it. And then we start on our water layer. So we're dealing with all the water. And after that, these are all the items we're including in the proposal. So water and access and soil. And then we get our initial concept plan, which is what you'll be creating in your assignment. And then we hear back from our clients. So we get feedback. And then we create that final concept based on their feedback. So that's an important step. And then we look at any details they want. And so in an urban drawing, we will price all of this together, and on acreage, we'll leave the details for a separate agreement or contract, because it's hard on a big site to figure out how much detail you're going to need before you've even started drawing. So yeah, then we get an acceptance, and then we somehow do a survey or get QGIS data. From that, we do a site visit, and we get our base map created. There you go. We get our sector map, and we share that. So each step, we are meeting with our clients on a Zoom meeting to go over the work and hear any feedback they might have. Then we do our water layer, and that's going to include, could be rain gardens, could be rainwater harvesting, could be on a larger site, maybe key line design. Again, then we have a meeting, and then we go through that same process with access. So how we move through the landscape, and that includes walkway, patio, retaining. It's a pretty big part of the design, usually, at least in urban projects. And then we present that. And then we look at soil, which is all our soft landscape. And that's the sort of the icing on the cake, the last step. And then all of that overlays, and it creates an initial concept, which we then have a meeting about, and then we finished our final concept. And then we go into details. So that is, in part, we do a planting palette creation. So we put together a planting palette, an example of plants that would work in various parts of the landscape. We don't use all the plants on the list, but basically we create the planting plan with that. And because we don't allow any edits in our planting plans, we're really, really careful that everybody's on board with what we're going to use. And I just can't do edits on planting plans because it unravels potentially undoes too much of the work. You almost have to start over. So I'm just not willing to do that. So we skirt that issue by allowing really good communication and feedback at this stage here. And then we look at construction details. So it's kind of a 20-step process for us for the most part. And yeah, that is about it for that. I don't know if anybody has any questions or wants to address anything now. Otherwise, I think we're pretty much done with our meeting. I didn't get a chance to show you how we go through and estimate our work, but maybe some other day. Yeah, how's everybody feeling? Do you have any comments or questions that you want to throw out? And if you do, you can certainly unmute or put it in the chat there. While we're just waiting, I'd like to just thank everybody for the excellent work that you've produced during the class. It's been very enjoyable. I really enjoy looking at other people's work, and that's one thing that I was a project manager, commercial landscape estimator for about 2.5 years, and oh, good question, Becca. I'll go grab this book I was referring to. But while I was doing this particular job for about 2.5 years, I got to see, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 landscape architects' drawings every week, because we'd go through and take a look at what we wanted to bid on. So the more you get to see and interact with other designers, the best. But just give me 2 seconds here. I'm going to grab a book for you. So 1 second. All right. Let me put it to the chat here. All right, that is the book and the author, and the fellow is now deceased. I'll see if I can find just an image of it here. I'm sure you can find this used. All right, we'll go to pictures. Okay. Just see if I can see a this is one of the most important. There's the fellow right there. And that he wrote us several books. That is not it, but if you found that, you'd be doing well. It's too bad that he passed, and then all of a sudden it was really difficult to get his book. Yeah. there's certainly a few used bookstores, Able Books. AB Books. That might be one place. It's taking its time. Maybe it'll find it. No. Yeah, it's getting harder and harder to find. But the beauty of this book is it gives you production times as well. And it may be, if you could find that, I think it has this component within it, but it is geared completely for the landscape industry. And that's the nice thing about it. Oh, Amazon's got it. I can't believe that. Currently unavailable. Yeah, too bad. Again, it might be a hard one to find, but it's certainly life-changing for me. Because I was coming out of a time where I was doing cost plus work, and all of a sudden I was into this new job where I had to estimate accurately and then execute with a crew, projects that were, on average, well, the $200,000-300,000 jobs, and that was way back in like 2008. So that'd be worth a lot more now, and you had to make money on them. So this book really helped a lot. It actually, with the firm I was working with, I kind of changed the whole format of how bids were done, and it was really effective. So I then was able to, when I quit that job and did my own thing again, I was able to accurately price and complete jobs. So it was great for everybody involved, clients included. They got good value. I'm not sure. There you go. This is it right here. And it's too bad it's unavailable. And that is too. I think I used to have this, but this is phenomenal. And I'm not sure what other books he has put together, but this is specifically for the landscape industry. And yeah, if you can find it, that's a good one to go after. All right. Well, I hope that's helpful. And yeah, I want to thank everybody again for all of your time and attention and all your hard work, and really looking forward to seeing your final design. And I hope that this course has been, an eye-opener for you and for those that want to carry on with design work. I wish you the best of luck. Yeah, and best of luck with your future, and get out there and design as many gardens or heal as much soil as you can do. So thank you again, everyone. You have yourself a great day, and look forward to seeing your assignment when you get her done. So thank you again. Take care.